In a city where silence often lives longer than justice, an 8-year-old girl tore through the noise barefoot, breathless, and braver than anyone expected. She didn't come with lawyers. She didn't come with backup. She came with a voice, a phone, and a story that would dismantle one of the city's most untouchable landlords. What began as a desperate plea at a police station door became a blueprint for revolution. This isn't just a story about standing up. It's about what happens when a child refuses to be quiet and teaches an entire system how to listen. It was the kind of late morning that felt suspended in time, coffee brewing in the break room, the dispatch radio crackling with minor incidents, and the city of Eastwood sighing beneath another warm spring sky. Officer Alan Reed had just sat down to his third cup of coffee, weary from a long week of routine patrols and bureaucratic complaints, when something outside the precinct window shattered the monotony like glass underfoot. A girl tiny, no more than 8, was sprinting down the sidewalk, her braids trailing behind her like signal flags and her cheeks streaked with tears. Her feet slapped the pavement with the urgency of someone carrying more than a child's weight. Without hesitation, Alan shoved his mug aside and bolted for the door. He didn't know it yet, but this little girl, Maya Bell, was about to lead him into the most strategically brilliant civilian justice operation he'd ever witnessed. And it all began with 7 words: "Please, someone help me. I need police." Maya grabbed Alan's uniform as if anchoring herself to safety, her small hands trembling but firm. There was no time for pleasantries. "You need to come to my house right now," she said, her voice cracked from crying but deliberate in tone. "My mother can't move, and men are saying horrible things to her. They're being very mean." Alan's instincts immediately flared. He'd been in law enforcement for over 2 decades. But the maturity in this child's voice, the piercing clarity of her gaze, it was unnerving. Most kids her age wouldn't be able to express trauma. Maya? She was orchestrating a rescue. Alan pressed the radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12 requesting backup. Possible domestic disturbance. Child present." Yet even as he moved swiftly toward the cruiser, he felt something gnaw at him. The girl wasn't just scared. She was prepared. When asked if the men were known to her family, Maya hesitated. "One is. His name is Mr. Langston. He owns our Bavingston house. He always comes when my mom's too sick to fight back." The words weren't just informative. They were strategic. This wasn't a random act of bravery. It was a mission. And the girl leading it was not merely a victim, she was a tactician in sneakers. As the patrol car sped through Eastwood's narrowing streets, Maya sat silently in the back seat, her face pressed to the window. She wasn't just bracing for what was to come, she was tracking it like a chess player watches an opponent's opening move. Alan could tell. He'd seen fear before. This wasn't just fear. This was focus. As they pulled up to Maple Lane, he spotted the house, a modest yellow cottage with a sagging fence and flower pots in the window. A gentle home in a battered neighborhood. "That's ours," Maya said, pointing firmly. 127. Before stepping out, Alan looked at her through the rearview mirror. "Are you absolutely sure you need help?" he asked one last time. "Mr. Reed," she answered without blinking. "My mom said there are moments when you have to choose between being silent and being true. Today is one of those moments." Alan Reed had seen his share of tragedy's silent screams buried in quiet homes, unspoken pain wrapped in neat gardens and faded curtains, but something about this one felt different. As they stepped onto the porch of 127 Maple Lane, the air around the house seemed to hold its breath. The windows were drawn. The house looked placid. But from inside, male voices drifted out low, angry, entitled. Alan reached for his radio, thumb hovering over the button, when Maya gently placed a hand on his wrist. "Mr. Reed," she said quietly, "before you go in, I have to tell you something. My mom's not sick like with the flu. She has something that makes her body stop working sometimes. Today, she couldn't even get out of bed." Alan crouched beside her again. She looked directly into his eyes, not with the desperation of a child clinging to hope, but with the precision of someone who had carefully rehearsed this moment. "Who are the men inside?" he asked. Maya's lips tightened. "The main one is Mr. Langston. He owns our home and about 20 more on this street. He always comes when Mom is too weak to argue, and today he brought other men. Security?" "Bullies," she corrected. "They don't speak. They just stand and let him yell." Alan's chest tightened. He'd dealt with scumbag landlords before, leeches who weaponized poverty to keep tenants too afraid to push back. But never had he met a tenant family prepared to fight back like this. Maya looked toward the house. "They think no one sees them when they're awful. But Mom, she sees everything, and she taught me how to listen." The words struck Alan like cold steel. This little girl wasn't just brave, she was deliberate, calculating, in the way abused people sometimes become, learning the patterns of their oppressors better than the oppressors know themselves. "Did your mom ask you to come get us?" "Not today. But she said if Mr. Langston ever crossed a line, I had to be brave. This morning I saw it in her eyes. Today was that day." The front door opened. A tall, thick man stepped into the doorway, wearing a dark blazer, with a gold pocket square that practically screamed overcompensation. Langston. His eyes narrowed when he spotted Alan. "Officer, what are you doing here?" Alan straightened. "I received a report that brought me here. You are Mr. Langston?" "Yes, and this is private property. Tenants late on rent." "She's playing the drama card now, is she?" Maya stepped forward, her voice clear and fierce. "We paid the rent. Yesterday, I was there at the bank." Langston turned red. "This girl is a liar, just like her mother." Alan watched him carefully. That crack in his composure, that wasn't the reaction of someone innocent. That was the twitch of someone caught off guard by evidence. "I'll need to speak with Mrs. Bell directly," Alan said, already moving forward. "She's indisposed," Langston snapped. "Not taking visitors." But Maya was already reaching into her hoodie pocket. She pulled out a modest cell phone. "Mr. Reed," she said calmly, "my mom taught me that adults lie. That's why she gave me this. I recorded the payment. I record a lot of things. You should see them." Langston froze. His arrogance drained into a pale flush. "That's illegal. You can't record people without permission." Maya met his eyes. "In my own house, I can." And Alan knew in that moment, this girl and her mother weren't cornered animals. They were hunters lying in wait. Langston, once a predator, was now prey, and he didn't even realize the trap had already closed. Alan stepped past Langston, the door creaking open into what looked like an ordinary living room. Neat, floral couch cushions, a shelf lined with well-worn books, the faint scent of lemon polish in the air. But sitting at the center of it all, propped up by pillows and wrapped in a soft blanket, was not the fragile woman he expected. Rachel Bell looked like someone who had stared down storms before and taken notes. Her posture was regal despite the pain, her eyes sharp despite exhaustion. On the coffee table in front of her was a stack of papers arranged with clinical precision, and her fingers, slender, trembling slightly, were sorting them like a lawyer preparing a brief. "Officer Reed," she said without missing a beat. "Thank you for coming. I assume Mr. Langston has already tried to convince you this is a misunderstanding." Langston barked from behind Alan. "This is harassment, not a crime." "She's playing the victim again." Rachel didn't flinch. "Maya, sweetheart, did you show him the video?" "Not yet," the girl answered, walking over to sit beside her mother. "But I told him you taught me to keep proof." "And that," Rachel said, turning back to Alan, "is why my daughter is the bravest person I know." Langston stepped forward, brimming with frustration. "You taught your kid to spy on adults? Record conversations? That's not normal. It's legal," Rachel snapped. "In my home, on my property, when the person being recorded is threatening me, it's not just legal, it's survival." Alan could see it now. This wasn't a panicked tenant begging for mercy. This was a tactician who had built her defense meticulously. "I've worked in a law firm for 15 years, she continued. "I'm not a lawyer, but I've sat in enough meetings to know how men like him operate, cornering single women, dangling power, betting that no one will believe us." Langston's face was beginning to glisten with sweat. He hadn't come for a negotiation. He came expecting compliance and found a tribunal instead. "Officer," Rachel continued, pulling a folder from beside her, "this is documentation from 6 other women in this neighborhood. Handwritten statements, dates, times, witnesses. Mr. Langston has used the same tactics on all of us. The difference today is he got recorded." Maya slid her phone across the coffee table. "Want to hear the part where he says my mom should be more creative to solve rent issues?" she asked Alan, her voice calm in a way that should never belong to a child. Alan picked up the phone. With one tap, the room filled with Langston's unmistakable voice. The tone was smirking, the implication undeniable. The words "women like you" echoed through the air like a gavel-pounding guilt. Langston blanched. That was taken out of context. She stammered. "This is an orchestrated hit job." Rachel leaned forward slightly. "You're absolutely right," she said. "It was orchestrated because we got tired of waiting for someone else to do the right thing." She reached into another folder. "We've been documenting for months. The audio, the threats, even his phone calls. Maya has recordings of him mocking tenants, boasting about how he cuts power to pressure people into leaving, bragging about who he's made cooperate." Alan didn't say a word. He was too busy writing down names. This wasn't just one case. This was a pattern, an empire built on intimidation and silence. But silence had ended the moment Maya walked into that precinct. Langston was unraveling, and Alan Reed could see it. His mouth moved, but no sentences formed. His carefully curated image, a man of means, a businessman, was collapsing under the weight of his own words. And what stunned Alan the most wasn't that this man had done terrible things. It was how perfectly Rachel and Maya Bell had built the snare to expose him. "You said she's just a child," Rachel said evenly, "but for 6 months she has recorded every time you stepped onto our property, every phone call you made in our backyard, every time you thought you were talking above her understanding. She was already archiving your downfall." Maya calmly walked over to a drawer, pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, and connected her phone. "Would you like to hear the call where he says, 'These families are like animals, you squeeze them and they submit'? Or the one where he laughs about Mrs. Avery going a week without heat in February?" Langston turned pale, the last of his smugness leaking away like air from a punctured tire. "You ... You can't use that in court," he muttered. "It's illegal. I didn't consent." "Actually," Alan interrupted, his voice now clipped and formal, "under Eastwood law, one-party consent is sufficient for recordings in private residences, especially in cases involving harassment, discrimination, or threats. And given that your voice is clearly identifiable and the property belongs to the tenant, I'd say we're well within legal bounds." Langston backed away, sweat dotting his brow. "This is a setup," he hissed. "You're just trying to ruin me. You've all gotten together to make me the bad guy." "Oh no," Maya said quietly, looking up at him with something between sorrow and steel. "You did that yourself. All we did was press record." Alan turned toward Rachel. "Do the other families have corroborating statements?" "More than statements," she replied. "We've been holding weekly meetings. We have printed records, notarized affidavits, screenshots of texts, and in one case, a hidden camera video. We've looped in legal aid, and ... She paused as Maya's phone vibrated. The little girl looked down, read the screen, and smiled. "It's time," she said. "They're here." Langston blinked. "Who's here?" Rachel looked almost amused. "The rest of the operation. You see, Mr. Langston, you may own 20 homes, but we own the truth. And we've invited some guests to witness it." A moment later, a knock echoed at the door. Then came the unmistakable sound of voices, reporters, microphones, camera shutters clicking into place. Patricia Lee from Channel 9, a local civil rights attorney, 2 city council members, and walking confidently into the room, Detective Elena Ruiz, known in Eastwood for prosecuting housing discrimination cases with surgical precision. Langston panicked. "You can't do this. This is private property. You're violating." "No," Detective Ruiz cut in. "You've been violating people for years, and now they're done playing quiet." Rachel turned to Alan. "You asked earlier if I was sure this wasn't just about rent. It never was. It was about justice. And sometimes, officer, justice needs a team." Detective Elena Ruiz wasted no time. "Mr. Langston," she said, flipping open a slim case file, "we have recorded testimony from at least 17 individuals across properties you own alleging intimidation, racial discrimination, sexual coercion, and illegal eviction tactics." She paused, letting the gravity of the words settle like dust in sunlight. "And now we have recordings. Your voice, your language, your intent." Langston was cornered, physically and psychologically. His eyes darted around the room first, to the reporters scribbling notes, then to the lawyers whispering behind folders, and finally to Maya, standing calmly beside her mother, arms crossed. "You're ruining my life," he said, voice cracking under pressure. "You're framing me." Rachel raised her eyebrows. "Framing? We documented. We verified. We timestamped and we gathered witnesses. If this is a frame, it's the most transparent one ever built." But it was Maya who delivered the line that turned the moment from confrontation to reckoning. She stepped forward, raised her phone again, and played another clip, Langston's voice, unmistakable. "These black women, they always make a fuss. If they just cooperate like that lady at 85, we wouldn't have a problem. You show them a little pressure, and they learn where they stand." The air in the room curdled. The reporters went still. Even Alan, who thought he'd seen everything, felt his jaw tighten. It wasn't just what Langston had said. It was how casually he had said it, how utterly normalized the cruelty had become. "Would you like to hear the part?" Maya asked, voice razor-sharp. "Where he jokes about Mrs. Stanton's power getting shut off for not answering his text. Or the one where he calls families cockroaches." Langston shook his head. "This is character assassination." "No," Ruiz said, stepping closer. "This is character revelation." She turned to Rachel. "Are all the recordings admissible?" Rachel nodded. "All time-stamped. All gathered in our home. All. With legal precedent." "Good," Ruiz said. "Because the district attorney will want to hear them immediately." Langston made one last desperate plea. "I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll sue everyone in this room." But Rachel had an answer prepared. "And I've got 17 families, 2 civil rights lawyers, a city council member, and 1 very brave little girl ready to testify." "You're not surrounded by enemies, Langston. You're surrounded by consequences." With a nod from Ruiz, Alan stepped forward. "Mr. Langston, you are under investigation for harassment, racial discrimination, and unlawful practices related to tenant intimidation. I advise you to remain available for further questioning." As he spoke, the room behind him came alive with clicking cameras and quiet applause. But it was Maya who held everyone's attention, still, poised, her innocence unbroken, but her strength undeniable. "My grandmother always said," she said softly, "that when powerful people do evil, sometimes God sends little people to remind them who they really are. Today is that reminder." As Langston stood frozen, caught between fury and fear, Rachel turned to Detective Ruiz and said, "There's something else you should see." She opened the manila folder and handed over a typed list: dates, times, properties, and audio log. Summaries. Ruiz scanned the sheet with practiced efficiency and gave a quiet nod. "It's all here." Maya, meanwhile, received another buzz on her phone. She glanced at the screen, then showed it to her mother with a grin, one that blended childhood glee with adult satisfaction. "The press vans are in place. Channel 9 and 13 are both outside. Miss Carla says the segment's going live at noon." Langston's head snapped around. "What segment? What the hell are you talking about?" Rachel's voice remained calm. "The story's already out. We sent it to trusted journalists. This isn't about public shame, Mr. Langston. It's about public truth, about showing families they're not alone." "You've ambushed me," he began. "No," said Maya, stepping closer. "We built something stronger than fear. That's not an ambush. That's a movement. The front door opened again, this time to admit Councilwoman Lena Morales, a known advocate for tenant rights reform. She carried a thick legal brief and walked directly to Rachel and Maya, ignoring Langston entirely. "You did it," Morales said, her voice low but vibrant. "We've got everything we need to push the reform package. What you've done here won't just stop him. It'll start something much bigger." Langston sputtered. "You can't do this. I have rights. And we have receipts," Morales said, flipping open her binder. "And evidence. And laws. You played the game too long with too much arrogance. Now you're just one more defendant in a very public file." Alan turned to Langston, whose stance had deflated into a jittery slump. "You said earlier that this was a conspiracy. It is a conspiracy of truth." The camera crews began filming. Outside, the home reporters narrating the history of the Bell's courage, the neighborhood's awakening, and the coordinated documentation effort that had brought a predator to his knees. Inside, Maya handed her phone to Ruiz. "There's one more file. We labeled it Final Blow. It's a phone call from 2 weeks ago," he tells a friend. How he teaches women their place. Ruiz listened through earbuds, nodding slowly as her jaw tightened. "This one alone could spark federal attention." She muttered, "Well done, Maya." The young girl nodded, not in pride, but in resolve. "We didn't want revenge. We just wanted it to stop for everyone." Rachel placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You did more than stop it," she whispered. "You rewrote the ending." By the time Langston was escorted outside, handcuffed and pale, the front lawn of the yellow house had transformed into a platform of change. Cameras followed every step, microphones pointed like truth-seeking arrows, and neighbors gathered silently along the sidewalk, not as spectators, but as witnesses. He looked out at the crowd, saw familiar faces, families he had pressured, mothers he had humiliated, and for the first time, he didn't see fear in their eyes. He saw fire, determination, and worst of all, solidarity. "I want my lawyer," he barked. "You'll need more than that," muttered Ruiz as she handed over the case packet to the arresting officer. As Langston was led into the patrol car, a reporter from Channel 13 called out, "Mr. Langston, do you have a response to the claims from 17 families?" He started to open his mouth, but the words never formed. Instead, the cameras cut to Maya and Rachel standing side by side on the porch unflinching. The footage would go viral in hours. Alan stayed behind as the crowd slowly dispersed, still absorbing what had just unfolded inside that humble home. He glanced over at Rachel, who was gathering the last of the files. "You two just took down a man no one thought could be touched," he said. "And you did it without yelling, without violence, just the truth." Rachel gave a tired smile. 15 years of working behind attorneys taught me that silence is what predators depend on." "And Maya?" "She taught me that sometimes the youngest voice carries the loudest truth." Maya giggled from the hallway, holding a notebook full of notes and newspaper clippings. "We call it the Justice Log," she told Alan, flipping to the back page. "We're gonna keep adding stories until every family in this neighborhood knows what their rights are. You're going to change. More than just this street," Alan said. "You've already started." At that moment, Maya's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a school in the next city over. "Would you be willing to speak to our students about how to ask for help?" She turned the screen to her mom. "They want me to teach other kids." Rachel's eyes glistened, but she nodded. Then let's get you ready. Outside, the news segment rolled into the evening broadcast. And across the city, perhaps across the country, parents, children, tenants, and officials watched a story not just about a bad man being caught, but about what happens when an ordinary family decides not to be scared anymore. 6 months later, Officer Alan Reed found himself back on Maple Lane, this time not in uniform, but with a cup of coffee in hand and a notebook tucked under his arm. The street had changed. Window boxes now bloomed with fresh flowers, and the homes, though modest, wore pride like armor. At the far end stood the familiar yellow house, its porch freshly painted, and a new sign hanging just above the doorframe: Legal Support, Community Center, founded by Rachel and Maya Bell. Alan stepped through the gate just as Maya, now 9, was setting up folding chairs on the lawn. "Mr. Reed," she beamed, running over. "Want to see the new research room? We have computers now too, and a wall with pictures of every family we helped." Inside, the transformation was profound. The same living room where Langston had once stood puffed up and condescending was now filled with bookshelves labeled Tenant Rights, Emergency Steps, and How to Record Safely. A whiteboard held upcoming community sessions: Know Your Rights, Thursday 6 p.m., and Recording Laws 101 sat with Maya. Rachel walked in with a tray of lemon tea. She looked healthier, lighter, as if some of the weight she'd carried had finally been set down. "The calls haven't stopped," she said. "Families from across the city, across the state even have heard the story. Some want advice. Some just want to know they're not alone." She nodded toward the wall, where dozens of thank you letters were pinned like war medals. Alan walked to the display. In the center hung a framed certificate from the mayor to Maya Bell, Civic Courage Award, for turning fear into power and lighting a path for others. Below it, a smaller plaque: "Justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it carries a cell phone in braids." "She's becoming a speaker now," Rachel added. "They've asked her to visit middle schools. She's helping children understand that even at their age, they can make noise when things feel wrong." Alan smiled, then looked around the room. "You've turned a single act of courage into a lighthouse. That man tried to bury you, and instead, you grew stronger." "That's the thing about seeds," Rachel replied. "They only grow after you bury them." Maya ran up, holding a fresh copy of her justice log, now nearly filled. We added 3 new stories last week," she told Alan. "One family caught a fake eviction threat. Another mom got her heat turned back on the next day because she used our letter template." She paused. "And someone from Channel 13 is doing a 6-month anniversary interview. They'll be here in an hour." Outside, a van was already pulling up. Cameras, a producer, a journalist who had once doubted the story but no longer. As lights were adjusted and mics clipped on, Maya sat on the porch steps, smoothing her skirt. She looked at Alan one more time. "Do you remember when you asked me if I was sure I needed help?" "I do," he said quietly. "I wasn't just asking for help," Maya replied. "I was starting something. I just didn't know yet what it would become." As the anniversary broadcast began, Maya's face filled television screens across Eastwood. Sitting upright in a folding chair on the porch where justice had once begun with a knock, she answered each question with a clarity far beyond her years. "What made you run to the police that day?" the reporter asked. "I didn't know who would help," Maya answered. "But I knew someone would. My mom always said that when you do the right thing, even scared, the universe hears you louder." Inside the house, Rachel watched with quiet pride, hands clasped in her lap. And just 2 blocks away, in the mayor's office, the broadcast was being streamed live as well, because the ripple effect had already begun. Thanks to Rachel and Maya's initiative, collected recordings, compiled legal findings, and relentless advocacy, a new ordinance had passed in Eastwood, the Tenant Protection and Harassment Accountability Act. It required landlords to provide written notices for all rent claims, made illegal any coercion tied to housing security, and established a publicly funded hotline for tenants to report abuse anonymously. And just 1 month ago, a statewide bill had been introduced under the same name. It wasn't just about Langston anymore. It was about every Langston who thought silence was armor. And Maya, with her cell phone, her braids, and her unshakable resolve, had pierced that armor. Alan stood in the back corner of the yard, watching as the camera captured the girl's final words. "Brave people aren't the ones who don't feel fear," she said. "They're the ones who feel it and still speak." That quote would go on to adorn posters in classrooms, become the opening slide in legal workshops, and even be printed on a city bus ad campaign. When the segment ended, Patricia from Channel 13 turned to the camera. "We've covered crimes, tragedies, and political scandals. But today we covered a beginning. A child who ran to the police and found her voice. A mother who prepared for justice like war. And a city that finally listened." Meanwhile, in a correctional facility just outside Eastwood, Terrence Langston sat in his cell, watching the segment from a bolted-down television. As Maya's voice echoed across the airwaves, he grimaced and reached for the remote, but paused just before switching it off. The look on his face wasn't just rage, it was recognition. He hadn't been defeated by lawyers or police or reporters. He had been brought down by the thing he never thought could fight back: truth told with preparation. Outside, as the sun began to dip and the press crew packed up their equipment, Rachel wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulder. "You know what I think the best part is?" she asked. "That you didn't just stand up for us. You showed people how to stand up for themselves." Maya smiled, glancing back toward the house. "The yellow house isn't ours anymore," she said. "It belongs to everyone now." Weeks after the broadcast aired, Rachel and Maya received letters from across the country. A high school teacher in Detroit used Maya's story to start a civic justice unit. A mother in Phoenix said she recorded her landlord's threats after seeing the segment and successfully won her case in court. A 12-year-old boy in Atlanta sent a photo of himself holding a sign, "I am not too young to speak." Inside the yellow house, now bustling with new volunteers, Maya stood in the community room where Langston had once spat insults. Today, that same space was filled with folding chairs, clipboards, and a sense of shared power. Rachel, now officially the director of the Bell Justice Initiative, walked into the room holding a printout. "You've been invited to speak at the State Education Board," she told Maya. "They want to develop a civic courage curriculum based on your story." Maya looked up from her notebook, wide-eyed. "Like for schools everywhere?" "Exactly," Rachel smiled. "They want to teach kids how to speak up, how to document, and how to believe in their voice." That afternoon, as the house hummed with activity, Officer Alan Reed returned once more, not for an emergency, not as backup, but as a community guest. He took a seat near the bookshelf labeled First Steps, where laminated cards showed how to handle threats, what phrases to use when calling 911, and where to find free legal help. He flipped through the justice log, now nearly full. Photos of families, headlines, thank you letters, new legislation clippings, all cataloged with handwritten captions by Maya. He spotted one final entry just added that morning, a photo of Maya, Rachel, and Councilwoman Morales standing outside City Hall beneath a new plaque that read, "Tenant rights begin with Awareness Bell Act passed 8-2 vote." Alan looked up, eyes glassy. He thought of how it had all started, with a girl running into the precinct, braids flying, tears streaming, voice shaking but certain, not of the outcome, but of the need to act. That certainty had rippled outward, reshaping policy, protecting families, and restoring something that predators like Langston had long tried to erase: belief. As the day came to a close, Maya stood in the front yard watching the sun set behind the trees. The air was warm, the neighborhood was quiet, and for the first time in a long time it felt truly safe. Alan joined her. "You still remember that day?" he asked. "Every second," she replied. "But I don't think about how scared I was anymore. I think about how powerful it felt when I finally spoke. And now you've given that power to others. That's what makes it real," she said. "Justice isn't just about punishing someone, it's about making something better for everyone else." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Maya turned, smiling. "You know what my grandma used to say." "What's that?" "The best revenge," she said, "is turning your pain into something so beautiful that it makes the people who tried to hurt you disappear." And in that yellow house on that quiet street, surrounded by the voices they had once silenced, a little girl and her mother built something that could never be erased. Real justice isn't just served in courtrooms. Sometimes it begins with a trembling voice in a cell phone held by a child who refuses to stay silent. Maya and Rachel Bell didn't wait for rescue. They prepared for it, they organized it, and they became it. Their story is proof that courage doesn't require power. It requires clarity, conviction, and community. The true mark of change is not punishment, but transformation. And in the end, what began in one small house bloomed into a movement strong enough to rewrite law, restore dignity, and remind a city what it means to protect its most vulnerable.